Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we share powerful real-life stories filled with emotion, heartbreak, unexpected twists, and life-changing moments. If you enjoy stories that reveal the complicated side of family, trust, love, and loss, then stay with me until the end. Today's story is one that stayed buried inside me for years, and even now, telling it feels like reopening an old wound. There are certain moments in life that never truly leave you. No matter how many years pass, no matter how hard you try to move forward, they remain somewhere deep inside, quietly shaping the person you become. They influence the way you think, the way you trust, and sometimes even the way you see yourself. For the longest time, I believed grief was the most painful thing a person could experience. I thought losing someone you love was the deepest wound life could inflict. When my mother passed away, it felt as if the foundation beneath my feet had disappeared overnight. The world that once felt familiar suddenly became cold and unrecognizable. But I eventually learned something terrifying. Sometimes the pain doesn't come from the person you lose. Sometimes it comes from the people who remain. My name is Leah, and this is a story I've never shared completely with anyone. Not with my closest friends. Not with family members. Not even with professionals who tried to help me talk about the things I kept locked away. For years, this story lived silently inside me. Today, I'm finally ready to tell it. It all began on a rainy evening shortly after my mother's death. Outside, a light drizzle tapped gently against the windows. The sound should have been comforting, but that night everything felt empty. I sat alone on my bed holding one of my mother's old sweaters against my chest. It still carried traces of her scent. Lavender. Coffee. Home. The smell instantly brought back memories of quiet mornings in the kitchen, hearing her hum while making breakfast, and the way she could make even the worst day feel manageable with a simple smile. I remember sitting there with tears in my eyes, wishing more than anything that I could hear her voice one last time. Then my father entered the room. At first, I thought he had come to check on me. After all, we were both grieving. At least that's what I believed. But the conversation that followed planted a feeling inside me that I couldn't explain. It wasn't loud or obvious. It wasn't something I could point to and immediately understand. It was just wrong. The kind of wrong feeling that settles quietly in your stomach. The kind that whispers instead of screams. And sometimes those whispers are far more dangerous. My mother died peacefully. Or at least that's what everyone said. One moment she was asleep beneath her favorite blanket, and the next she was gone. I was the one who found her. The television was still playing softly in the background. She had fallen asleep watching one of her favorite nature documentaries. She loved programs about forests, oceans, and wildlife. She used to say they reminded her that beauty still existed in the world no matter how difficult life became. That morning, however, there was no beauty. Only silence. A heavy silence that seemed to fill every corner of the house. The days that followed felt unreal. People often imagine grief as endless tears and emotional breakdowns. For me, it wasn't like that at all. I felt numb. Completely numb. The funeral came, and went like a dream I couldn't wake up from. Family friends offered condolences. People hugged me. People told me she was in a better place. I thanked them politely, but I barely heard a word anyone said. My younger brother, Jaden, hardly spoke during the service. He kept his head down and avoided eye contact with everyone. The pain was written all over his face even though he refused to talk about it. My father, Edward, stood completely still throughout the entire ceremony. No tears. No visible emotion. Nothing. He accepted condolences with a simple nod and thanked people for coming, but his eyes seemed distant, as though he were somewhere far away. Looking back, maybe he always was. Growing up, my father was never particularly close to us. He wasn't abusive. He wasn't cruel. But he wasn't warm either. He was a man who spent most of his life working and avoiding conversations. He would come home late, eat dinner quietly, then fall asleep in his chair with the television remote still resting in his hand. Sometimes entire days would pass without us sharing a meaningful conversation. My mother constantly defended him. He's tired, she would say. He's doing his best. Maybe she was right. Or maybe she simply loved him enough to overlook the distance between them. Either way, she never stopped trying. Even when he forgot important dates. Even when he seemed emotionally unavailable. Even when she sat alone after another failed attempt to connect with him. She never stopped loving him. I witnessed all of it. And like many children, I learned an important survival skill early in life. Stay quiet. Don't cause problems. Don't make things harder. Jaden was different. He wore his emotions openly. He was sensitive, creative, and endlessly caring. If something was broken, he wanted to fix it. If someone was hurting, he wanted to help. But after Mom died, even Jaden changed. He stopped playing guitar. He stopped meeting friends. He locked himself in his room for hours at a time. Music blasted through the walls day and night, loud enough to shake the floorboards. I knew he was hurting. The truth was, I was hurting too much to help him. The house became unbearable. Every room contained reminders of her. Her favorite mug still sat near the sink. Her shoes remained beside the front door. A half-read book rested on the coffee table exactly where she'd left it. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. It felt as though time itself had frozen. Sometimes I would sit on the porch wearing one of her sweaters and flipping through her journals. I rarely made it more than a few pages before the emotions became overwhelming. Reading her words felt like hearing her voice again. And losing her all over again. That's when I started noticing changes in my father. At first, they seemed small. Harmless, even. He paid more attention to me than he ever had before. He watched me more closely. He lingered during conversations. Sometimes I would look up and find him standing silently in the doorway, observing me without saying anything. I told myself it was grief. I told myself we were all struggling. But a strange feeling continued growing inside me. One night, unable to sleep, I walked downstairs to get a glass of water. The house was dark except for pale moonlight filtering through the windows. That's when I noticed him sitting alone in the kitchen. He didn't turn on any lights. He simply sat there in silence. When he saw me, he sighed heavily. "I keep expecting her to walk through that door," he said quietly. I nodded. "So do I." For a moment, it felt like a normal conversation between two grieving family members. Then he looked directly at me. His expression changed. "She was the heart of this house," he said. "Now it's just you and me." Something about the way he said it made me uncomfortable. I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was his tone. Maybe it was the way he looked at me afterward. Or maybe some part of me recognized a danger my mind wasn't ready to accept. I returned to my room that night feeling unsettled. But I ignored the feeling. I convinced myself I was imagining things. I convinced myself grief was making me overly sensitive. Most importantly, I convinced myself that family was supposed to stay together during difficult times. So I stayed. I stayed because I believed we could survive the loss together. I stayed because I trusted the people around me. I stayed because I had no idea how much my life was about to change. And if I had known what was coming next, I would have left that house long before everything began to unravel. The weeks after that conversation felt strange. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just strange. The kind of strange that slowly works its way into your thoughts until you can no longer ignore it. Life inside the house continued moving forward, at least on the surface. We woke up, ate meals, and went through our daily routines. Anyone looking from the outside would have thought we were simply a family trying to heal after a devastating loss. But beneath that surface, something had changed. And I could feel it. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when things took another turn. The sky outside was covered with thick gray clouds, and the entire neighborhood seemed wrapped in a heavy silence. I had finally gathered enough courage to start sorting through some of Mom's belongings. Not because I was ready. I wasn't. I don't think anyone is ever truly ready to pack away the life of someone they love. But every time I walked past her room, it felt like stepping into a memory that refused to let go. The untouched space was becoming harder to bear than the grief itself. So I opened the windows, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The room still looked exactly the way she had left it. Her favorite books rested neatly on the nightstand. A pair of reading glasses sat beside them. A scarf hung from the corner of a chair. Every object seemed frozen in time. I carefully opened her closet. The familiar scent nearly brought me to tears. For several moments, I simply stood there holding one of her sweaters, remembering all the times I had seen her wearing it while cooking dinner or reading in the living room. It felt impossible that she was gone. As I sorted through her things, memories flooded back. Birthdays, family vacations, movie nights, simple moments that once seemed ordinary but now felt priceless. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, measured, unmistakable. I turned and saw my father standing in the doorway. He was holding an old cardboard box against his chest. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he slowly walked into the room. "I found this in the attic," he said quietly. His voice sounded softer than usual, more deliberate, almost careful. He placed the box on the bed and sat beside it. I expected him to leave after that. Instead, he remained seated, watching, waiting. Curious, I opened the box. Inside were dozens of old photographs, pictures I had never seen before. There were photos of my parents when they were young, before children, before mortgages, before responsibilities, before life had worn them down. In those photographs, they looked happy, genuinely happy. My mother was laughing in nearly every picture. And my father, he was smiling, a real smile, one I barely recognized. There were letters inside the box too, dozens of them. Some were folded carefully. Others showed signs of being opened and reread many times. One envelope still had a faded lipstick mark near the seal. My throat tightened. My mother had saved everything, every memory, every piece of their story. "I used to write her constantly," my father said. His eyes never left the photographs. Whenever I was away, she'd keep every letter. For the first time in years, he sounded emotional, vulnerable, human. And despite my discomfort, part of me felt sympathy, because grief has a way of making even complicated people seem fragile. As we looked through the photographs, he began sharing stories. Stories from before I was born. Stories about road trips, tiny apartments, dreams they once had together. For a little while, everything felt normal. Then something changed. It was subtle, almost impossible to describe. But I felt it immediately. His hand moved across the bed and rested gently on top of mine. At first, I assumed it was accidental. But it stayed there. Longer than necessary. Long enough for me to become uncomfortable. My chest tightened. Slowly, I pulled my hand away and pretended to focus on the photographs. He didn't mention it. Neither did I. But the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The comfortable sadness that had existed moments earlier suddenly disappeared. In its place was tension. The kind that makes your instincts start whispering warnings. I continued looking through the box while trying to ignore the feeling. Then he spoke again. "It's just us now, Leah." His voice was calm. Too calm. "We need each other." The words themselves weren't alarming. Not on their own. But something about the way he said them made my stomach knot. I wanted to believe he simply meant family, support, survival. Yet the uneasy feeling returned stronger than before. I suddenly felt trapped inside the room. The walls seemed smaller. The air seemed heavier. I stood up quickly. "I think I'm going to take a break," I said. He nodded. But his eyes followed me all the way to the door. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I couldn't focus. Couldn't read. Couldn't watch television. Couldn't even listen to music. Every few minutes, my mind replayed the conversation. Every glance. Every word. Every uncomfortable moment. And each time the feeling returned. Something wasn't right. That evening, dinner was unusually quiet. Jaden barely touched his food. Dad spoke very little. But whenever I looked up, I caught him watching me. Not every second. Not constantly. Just enough to make me notice. Just enough to make me uncomfortable. After dinner, I retreated to my room. I locked the door. At the time, I told myself it was simply because I wanted privacy. Looking back, I think I already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to admit it. Hours passed. The house grew quiet. Eventually, everyone seemed to go to bed. I lay beneath the blankets staring at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. Every sound felt louder than usual. Every creak in the house made me tense. Then sometime after midnight, I heard it. 3 soft knocks. Top. 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 I froze instantly. For a moment, I thought it might be Jaden. Maybe he couldn't sleep. Maybe he wanted someone to talk to. But something deep inside me already knew who it was. The knocks came again. Gentle. Patient. Waiting. My heart began pounding. I stayed completely still. A few seconds later, the door slowly opened. A dark silhouette appeared in the doorway. Tall. Broad. Familiar. My father. Leah, he whispered. You awake? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My body felt locked in place. He stepped into the room. Quietly. Carefully. Almost as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. The sight alone sent fear racing through me. I remember staring into the darkness, pretending to be asleep while every muscle in my body screamed for me to move. But I couldn't. Fear has a strange effect on people. Sometimes it makes you run. Sometimes it makes you fight. And sometimes it freezes you completely. I lay there motionless as he stood near my bed. The silence felt endless. Then he spoke. His voice was barely above a whisper. And what he said next would stay with me for years. Because in that moment, every certainty I had about my family began to crack.